There's no reason why you would know this, but it's show 2000 this evening. 2000 shows, getting on for 10 years, really. We've changed time. We were at 10 p.m. and then 6 p.m. and been at 8 p.m. for a while now. And the audience has grown steadily to what it is now, and it's very large. And we have a national following on satellite and a large, loyal following growing all the time in Ontario. Why? I'm not here to sing my praises, for goodness sake. I don't think I'm particularly relevant. I think the show is about light and heat, and it rocks the boat. And boats are meant to be rocked. They're far more fun when they're rocking, aren't they? No fawning interviews, no bending the knee to the CBC liberal establishment, challenging both right and left, getting the truth. It's TV at its best. Maybe it's not very Canadian, but that doesn't matter to me. We do a good show. Alienate some people, that's good. If you want easy answers, easy solutions, and simple questions, not the place to come. For those of you who do watch all the time, thank you. For those of you who are joining on a regular basis, thank you too. It's going to be fun. Another 2000 shows at least. Happy birthday to, well, to me. Michael Koren Show. Join me. Hello, good evening. Welcome to the Michael Koren Show. It's Tuesday, and every Tuesday what we do on the show is either a separate subject, a theme, or an interview. It's a major player coming through town. Wednesdays, of course, we have our This Week panel. Thursdays, federal politics, MPs, and those sort of people. And Friday, that was the week that was. Oh, Monday, next Monday, I'll start the week panel. One of the guests will be John O'Sullivan, former editor of the National Review, speechwriter for Margaret Thatcher. A very interesting man indeed. We also have the brother of the Israeli Prime Minister, an activist and politician in his own standing, on the show coming up too. Anyway, lots of good shows. Go to the website, michaelkoren.com, for all the information. Gun control is the issue. Virginia Tech, the catalyst. I mean, after Virginia Tech, everyone was an expert, weren't they, on every single issue involving humanity and guns and violence and safety. We put a panel together. Let's introduce them. Tracy Christie, terrible story. Her daughter was murdered by a young offender, but there's much more to her than that, of course. Great to have you here. John Muse, Director of Public Safety. There's a lot to say here. Canadian Centre for Abuse Awareness. Hello.
Hello, thank you, Michael.
Tony Bernardo, Executive Director, Canadian Institute for Legislative Action.
Thank you for having me.
Can't you have simpler titles? And Andrea Hannon, Regional Director, Central Ontario, Canadian Shooting Sports Association. I think I'll just say A, B, C, and D. It might be easier. Does Virginia Tech teach us anything about gun control?
Well, I think Virginia Tech, the campus itself, was very much a gun-free zone, but I don't really think it's a relevant lesson for gun control.
Meaning?
Meaning, well, I think that it has more to do with how mental health issues are handled in society than how we handle guns and legislation surrounding guns.
One group would argue, yes, he may have been, this man should have been spotted and maybe incarcerated or treated earlier, but the fact is he had access to high-powered handguns. If that hadn't been the case, he may have killed people, but to be quite clinical about it, less people.
There was no screening process in place that could detect his sickness, I guess.
Yeah, but the gun control issue. I mean, he was allowed to go and anyone can buy a high-powered handgun, and he could, if he had a knife or a shotgun, he could have killed people, but 32, if there was more severe gun control, surely he wouldn't have had access to that weapon.
Well, is it more severe gun control, or is it more prompt response after the initial 2 shootings? Right. I think that's a bigger issue.
Okay.
Because the initial 2 shootings, I mean, we can't ever know what's in somebody's heart.
Sure.
And anybody can snow job any interviewer for a few minutes. But, you know, when it comes down to ample opportunity to respond to the situation, there was an assumption made that this was basically a domestic and that the thing was over after the first couple of shootings. And maybe that was a legitimate assumption, but you know, it certainly doesn't help the people who perished as a result of the assumption. Okay,
bad guys can get access to weapons. It's naive to think they can't. He, though, wasn't part of the underworld. He wasn't part of the criminal class in particular, but he could legally buy very powerful weapons. That's the point I'm making here. If he didn't have that right, would we be safer?
Well, Michael, if I can speak for Andrew
no, you can't.
This. I can't?
Go ahead.
In areas where gun control is much stricter, Canada, for example, we've had school shootings. In Germany, where guns are almost completely outlawed, they've had school shootings. And in
UK
Japan,
as well.
in Japan, just a couple of weeks ago, the mayor of Hiroshima was murdered, and guns are outlawed.
Nagasaki, I think, right?
Nagasaki.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
He was shot to death. Guns are outlawed in Japan.
Well, he was murdered by a gangster.
Yeah, well, maybe that's
He was a
the point.
notorious gangster who was angry about some city regulations.
But I guess the most repressive gun control scheme in the world didn't stop that gangster from obtaining a firearm. And I think that one of the things we have to remember is the largest mass murder in Canadian history was committed with a 5-gallon can of gasoline. The largest mass murder in U.S. history was committed with a jet airliner, and their second largest was a truck full of farm fertilizer. Evil is in people's hearts. You cannot legislate against evil.
These are all valid points, and we've got a long time to debate this. However, in a real society, there'll always be suffering and pain and loss. We can try to minimize.
Absolutely.
So, weighing the freedom and the right of someone to own a high-powered handgun to the ability of people to survive a murderous attack, why not just say, well, hey, we'll go for the latter and ban those high-powered handguns?
Like everything else in our society, we have balances. And we have balances against certain types of vehicles being on roads. And we balance the needs of operators of vehicles versus public safety. And I think that in most jurisdictions, there is a balance there. Like all balances, you occasionally get extremes to both ends, but a balance did exist. Virginia does have gun control laws. This man was put through an FBI check, but once again, the gun control system failed. And it failed because the systems are designed to attack the wrong people. There are basically only two kinds of people in the world. There are good people and there are evil people. Right. And when you set up a system that is designed to attack good people in an attempt to stop evil people, you're doomed to failure, aren't you?
All right, a lot more to hear. Actually, I'm in the middle. I'm sort of good and bad at the same time. But anyway, back in a few moments on the Michael Curran Show commercials. They pay the bills, they're wonderful. Watch, buy, and then come straight back to us. There's the other side to listen to. We'll see you.